Hello, and welcome back to another episode of How to Leave a Cult. I am your host, Brooke Walker. How to Leave a Cult is my biography of my time living in a religious cult and the religious trauma that occurred during that time. And as I tell you the story, I also like to share how to heal religious trauma, and I also discuss some of the psychology behind why certain things are done to people. And so, if this is your first time here, welcome. Glad to have you. Um, a little bit about last week. And it wasn't last week, last episode. Last episode, we discussed a relationship I got into and how that relationship fell apart. But one of the things we're going to dive into this week is how that was a catalyst. One of the biggest questions I get asked was, what made you leave? And I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. There was not a singular thing that made me leave. It was occurrences that happened over time and how things begin to fall apart. And the falling apart of things is what eventually created me leaving. And part of what made it really difficult was the fact that I didn't have skills because I had been in the group since I was 8. So there was a lot of skills I never developed that gave me the ability to support myself and my 2 children by this time. So let's dive into this week. And then at the very end of the episode, I also want to talk about how our beliefs affect our bodies. And because I'm really going to dive into this episode of how I continued to decline after the end of that relationship, because I touched a lot on how difficult it was, the shaming that occurred in the group. But from there, that created this downward spiral for where I was at. So the end of the relationship that I had been in, it was like an absolute catalyst for going down a spiral. My health, I can't even talk today. My body began to spiral. And the first time it had happened was when I was a teenager. I had fainted when I was young. When I got divorced, I was having what I thought were panic attacks at the time. And at the end of this relationship, that got to the worst it had ever been. Now, my stress was also through the roof. I was a single mother. I think my kids were like 7 and 8, 8 and 9, somewhere in that age at the time. And I was living in a home in the village, in Tonto Village, Arizona, which is outside the Payson area. I was working 3 jobs. So I was working at the school. I had started working at the Shelby School, which was the charter school that the church ran. And I also was working at a steakhouse down the road called Cole's Ranch, which some people are familiar with. And I was like a sous chef there. That job I actually kind of enjoyed in a lot of ways. And then I was also doing nails. So I had 3 jobs trying to keep afloat. And part of that was because I was working at the school. So I did okay working at the steakhouse. It was barely enough to kind of keep me afloat. But I was only working there some of the time because when I first moved back to Payson, or outside of Payson, I was told to start working at the school. And I first started just helping out. And anytime you help do anything, eventually you were going to get sucked fully into it. So my kids are going to the charter school, and then I start working at the charter school. And all of a sudden, I become the 2nd grade teacher, which I was really not equipped. I mean, I wasn't a teacher. Like, let's just start with the fact that I just wasn't a fucking teacher. Okay. So, and I think I was making, like, one day I did the math on my paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, and I was making like somewhere between, I want to say I was making like maybe $4 an hour, but I almost think that's generous. It might have been closer to 2. And that was just what they decided they were going to pay me. It was what they could afford to pay me to teach full time, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And the school was a literal fucking shit show. And it was, for nothing else, completely money motivated. Now, I know that there are different people that came to the school from the Payson area because it was a charter school. And basically, what a charter school is, if I haven't explained it, I'll explain it again in this episode. A charter school is made to, you have to go through some certain loopholes and legalities to be able to be funded by the state. But then anybody can come to the school, just like they can come to a public school. So there was a lot of kids that would get kicked out of Payson and then they would come to the charter school. And so there was a lot of children, initially when the school started, 20 years earlier or whatever it had been by then, when I was a kid and going to it, we had a private school and it was really just church kids. That's what it was. And it was taught by different parents in the church, funded by parents in the church. And the benefit of it was really, I think, to keep us separate. I mean, I think there was some good intentions about the reasons why, but I also look back and think it was not only the worst business decision, but also not a great decision for a lot of the children that went there. Because we didn't have the access to a lot of different things. Now, you could go look at the chess team and different things that came out of that school and see some successful things that occurred. But at the end of the day, it was money motivated, and I don't even know that they made a lot of money off of it. And I'll explain that. It had gotten to by the point that I was working at it, it had gotten to this degree that I felt like all of our kids were always at the effect of other kids that were all, you've got these kids that are kind of sheltered in some ways. My kids had been sheltered in some ways, although my kids not as much as some of the kids, because honestly, my kids had been in daycare and stuff by then. But you had different kids that were somewhat sheltered, and all of a sudden they're with kids that are getting kicked out of school. So these are kids that are having a lot of trouble. And so it became not a great environment. And I was particularly pissed off about it quite a bit because my kids started getting the brunt of certain situations. There was one kid who was coming to the school and he was in the same class with my son. And there was another kid that was my son's friend. And my son was defending him because my son was a larger kid, meaning that he was just bigger and stronger, and ended up getting in a huge fight with this other kid. And this was incident after incident. And I remember going to one of the other teachers who ran some things at the school at the time, because I believe this kid brought a knife to the school. And I'm like, this has been incident after incident. Why is this kid still coming to school? Why is he not getting expelled? Why is he not getting sent home? And the answer was, we haven't hit the 100 and whateverth day. And we don't get a check until we hit that day for this kid being on the enrollment. And I was like, that is fucking bullshit. And I'm not having my kid in danger because of the fact that the Shelby School wants a few more fucking dollars to keep this kid enrolled. And there was so many times that happened. There were so many times that kids would get enrolled in the Shelby School and they wouldn't get kicked out, even though they were problem children. They didn't follow the rules. There was no accountability, and they could be violent towards other kids because we needed to make sure we waited until we got the paycheck. I still have like just mind blown about it. But again, at the time, like I've got a billion other things going on. Like I'm not going to homeschool my kids, although at the time I probably should have sent them to public school, but I didn't have the guts to fight the cult at the time. And I'm in this mindset at the time that all the things that are going on in my life are my fault. That I've completely created this situation because I was dating somebody I should have never dated. And, I think that it's my fault that I have all this physical stuff going on, that I'm having these panic attacks, and I'm working 3 jobs, and I'm drinking and smoking and just stressed out beyond. I'm a single mother with 2 kids and trying to do the best for my kids. But I had been annihilated by Dr. Duran, who was the teacher who Trina tranced, supposedly. And I was also getting annihilated at processes, and I was getting yelled at for different things. And then Stephen Camp decides that also I need to not go out. He's like, for a year, you need to just not go out at all and just stay home and be a mom and work. And like, I can spend time with all the women, but if they're going out, I can't go out with them. And at the time, all the women were always going out. If people were going somewhere, they were going out. So all of a sudden, I'm just spending all my time at home with nobody else because I don't have anybody else to spend time with because everybody's gone all the time. And I was just sinking. I was depressed, and I'm having these horrible panic attacks is what I think that they are, where all of a sudden my heart would start racing. And one night I'm at the steakhouse that I work at, and I fainted. I'm behind the line. I've got knives and food on one side. I've got this huge stove on the other side. And I just remember that I'm standing there and we're in the middle of a dinner rush. And I just remember my eyesight started going black. And then I remember getting up off the ground. And there was a chef standing next to me. I think he was still cooking. I don't know if it's funny because I've been like rethinking about this situation and his lack of acting like anything had happened. Like he was still going. Like I'm passed out and I've just fallen to the ground and mush and he's cooking. And I was like, what the fuck? Like who does that? But anyway, so I come to. Somehow I've managed not to fall on anything other than just the ground. And when I come to, my heart is still racing out of my chest. It feels like my heart is going to explode. And my entire chest is tight and I'm having trouble breathing. And emotionally, I'm a wreck. And I probably started crying. And I remember just going out back where we used to go smoke cigarettes and just sitting there trying to calm down. I was trying to breathe slow. I was just trying to just like calm myself, but I didn't know how to calm myself at the time. And I think I ended up having somebody come pick me up and I ended up going home early that night. And that was like this beginning of feeling like I didn't know what to do anymore. And so, of course, anytime anybody's telling me something to do, I'm just going with it because I don't know what to do. And I decide that I'm going to go to a doctor. But of course, if you had a medical condition, you can't just go to an actual medical professional. You also got to talk to Dr. Duran about it and get his medical professional opinion. And so I remember going to not an emergency room, but just one of the care places. Fucking perimenopause. Can't fucking remember the goddamn word. Anyway, going to an urgent care. So I go to an urgent care. They prescribe me Lexapro, they prescribe me Xanax, and she's like, "We really think you need to go see a regular physician to be followed up upon, but like this is a start." And I am like, "Okay, fine. Like solution. Like here we are. This is going to be great. I'm going to, these things are going to help me." And so I'm taking antidepressants and I'm taking Xanax, and the Xanax makes me exhausted. And then I go to trance, and Dr. Duran tells me that I need to continue, that I need to drink more. He says that I need to be a closet alcoholic because that's going to make everything better. As if I start just being, he's like, you just need to be an alcoholic for a while. You just need to drink more. It's okay. It'll be okay for a little while. He's like, some of my children do that sometimes. Like that's like the solution in life is to drink more alcohol. And so I think I was going through probably a handle of vodka a week or something, which if you're not familiar with what a handle of vodka is, it's the very large bottles of vodka. And maybe some other alcohols too. And I used to get coffee cups from work sometimes, but like I bought them at Walmart, and I would make a very heavy vodka drink in the morning before I went to the school to teach. Or sometimes I'd put Kahlua in my coffee with vodka. Because Kahlua by itself wasn't strong enough. And then when I felt a panic attack coming on, I would take a Xanax. And if I had to work early in the morning at the steakhouse, I would also bring a drink. And if I went again in the afternoon, then I would also bring a drink. So I was just downing vodka whenever. I don't know that the amount that I drink altogether was an enormous amount, but I was always drinking throughout the day, unless I had to drive somewhere. So in the mornings I'd go to school, and the school was just, you just walk and get there. So I wasn't driving there. So I would just bring that with me, and that would get me through the day. And then when I'd go to work at night, I would usually like bring my cup, my drink of whatever it was. And then there was one of the guys who was a bartender there. I knew him, and so sometimes he would sneak me drinks occasionally too, because he was in the cult too. So, it was, I look back at that time and I'm just like astounded by all of the horrible fucking advice I got. So then I'm going to the actual doctor, and I'm like slowly like closeting myself from everybody. And then as I'm on the antidepressants and I am exhausted. Like I'm working all the time, but I'm like exhausted. I don't think I was sleeping very much. No, I was sleeping like a rock. Let me fix that. I would go to bed at night. I would get up and go to work. And if I had time during the day, I would take a nap. And so if I got out of school at like 3:00 and I didn't work until 6, I would come home, sleep for 2 more hours besides whatever I had to do to like get my kids fed and taken care of. And then I would go back to work. And then I'd come home at night and I would sleep like a rock until I had to leave in the morning and go to the school again. And it was just this ongoing cycle. And I was miserable. I was emotionally miserable. And I had felt beat up by everything that Duran had said to me about how that relationship had been, that we talked about in the last episode. But then getting beat up by the ministers. And the thing about this in this type of environment, when you're in a cult and the ministers are on you about stuff, the thing is that the other members are going to do that too. the other members are going to follow suit. There's an expectation that they treat you a certain way. And so it wasn't like there had become this loving environment of help with me going through all of this stuff. And I'm continuing to go to doctor's appointments, and I go to another doctor, and the doctor basically looks at me and I'm like, I'm not doing well. I remember sobbing to my mother, and I remember sobbing to Jessica at different times and saying, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I'm not okay. And I go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, because I'm getting EKG after EKG. And they're like, he's like, Tai Chi's been really good for me. Maybe you should do some Tai Chi. Maybe you just need to go to a psychologist. Like, talk about women's fucking healthcare, where you go to a doctor and they do absolutely fucking nothing to you. That whole experience was this. It was like that maybe I was just mentally not well enough, and maybe some Tai Chi and a psychologist was going to make me all better. And let's also just put you on some more fucking drugs while you're drowning in alcohol and smoking cigarettes. I'm sure everything is going to get okay real soon. So that doctor recommends me to a heart specialist. So I go to this heart specialist, and he puts me on a heart monitor. So now I'm on a heart monitor, and I'm carrying around this thing, which basically it's attached to a couple different spots, and trying to catch one of my panic attacks on this thing. And to do so, you press the button when one happens. So I think I wore it for weeks with nothing happening. And he's like, you're just going to wear it until something happens. But at the same time, like, life's going on, right? And I'm really beginning to hit this point that I'm really looking at my life differently. The only blessing about life being really hard is you will try to find solutions on your own. And I didn't feel like I had any support. Like, my mom was always there for me, but I also, like, me and my mom's relationship at that particular time wasn't great. She was caretaking for my kids a lot of the time, so she was watching my kids. And that was creating a relationship with my mom and my kids that I didn't like, because she was like overseeing everything, and so she was kind of like enforcing things with my kids. So when there was problems with my kids, my mom was like on my kids. And I was like, this is not the grandparent that I think I want my mom to be for my kids. I want my mom to enjoy being a grandparent to my children, and that's not what's happening. So I'm starting to look for outs. And I'm starting to go, what do I need? And at that time, me and Jessica started talking about moving away and what that would look like. And then another thing that like absolutely fucking put me over the edge is I get a phone call one day. Now, one of the things that could be a beautiful thing about living in that kind of environment is when people banded together to help you, you really felt supported. All the women and all the men showing up to help you do something. Like, if we hadn't been forced to move all the time, it was really nice. When you were moving, you'd have a band of people show up to help you move and clean your house and get you packed, and a bunch of people lifting everything and getting you moved over. Like, that was a nice thing about that kind of community, right? We had a community. The problem is that I was never at the support side of that community. I was only ever called to help. I was never helped. And I remember a phone call one day where one of the women calls me and she says, everybody's getting together. She's like, we really need you to come over too. We're trying to get everybody who's available together to come over and help. And I'll just call the woman at the time Dahlia. Dahlia's not doing well. So we're all going to go help and clean her house and, help her make dinner. And it was like everybody and all because her husband showed up to trance today and he was talking to Duran. And so Duran's called that everybody needs to get together. I fucking had a panic attack. I had an immediate panic attack as soon as I got off the phone because I was enraged. And I was never allowed to have those emotions. I was never allowed to just be like, yeah, I'm fucking furious about this. Nobody showed up to my house because I don't have a husband to go complain about the fact that I'm having a nervous breakdown over here, even though I'm a single mother with 2 kids. And it's not to say that she couldn't get help. Like, she could get help. But, like, why did nobody ever try to help me in the middle of anything I was ever going through? Do you know how many fucking women's houses that I fucking cleaned and how many children that I babysat? Nobody ever pulled shit together to help me. And I needed it. And so I was furious. And then while working at the school, so one of the key things that Stephen Camp used to fucking do is, it must have been a tax situation because I can't figure out how the math would work otherwise, and maybe somebody understands how it would. But so Stephen Camp calls me and he's like, so I have a bonus for you, but I need you to pay it back to me. He's like, from the school. It's like, so I need you to come over and pick up this check. And I get over there, and at first I was like, oh, so it's a bonus? And he gave me, and I think I got fucked on it too. He gave me $400 because I think at the time it was right before when I was still in the relationship with the last person. And he's like, I need you to donate it back to the school. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm going to give you this check, you deposit it, and then you write a check to the school, and then you'll get it back on your taxes. And, the government will pay you back for it. I'm like, okay. And of course, I'm just Miss Do as she's fucking told. So I take the check, I write him a check, and I think I got fucked out of $200 because I think the only amount that I could have gotten reimbursed was for one person, not 2. So I'm pretty sure that I got screwed out of $200 on top of it. But, So then, I finally catch one of the incidents with my heart reacting. And what you had to do at the time with these machines was you had to call into a number and like turn it on so it would like transfer it over the phone or whatever. I get a phone call back from my doctor and he says, you need to go to the emergency room immediately. I was like, why? I'm fine. And he's like, no, your heart's beating over 200 beats per minute. He's like, that's not normal. So I go to the emergency room's same shit, like didn't find anything. And, but that heart doctor referred me to a surgeon and they determined that I needed to get the heart surgery, which I kind of discussed in the last one too, but I'm kind of talking about the situation that all went through that. So by then me and Jessica have totally decided that we are taking our kids and her husband, and we're going to move away and we're going to get a house together and move to Austin. And her husband wanted to do it for the sake of his music career. And I was originally from Austin, so I was kind of excited to go back to a place that I had really fond memories of. But we're slowly just talking about how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it and what it's going to look like and getting jobs there and all this kind of stuff. And all these incidents had created this part in me that I was like, I will not be where I am right now. And it made me super focused on getting myself to a different place. And I don't mean physically, I mean like emotionally. I wanted to make sure that I was going to get my health together, so I was going to be around a really long time. I wanted to make sure that I was going to get my financial future together because I didn't want to keep working 3 jobs. I was like determined that I was not going to be the person who forever worked multiple jobs the rest of my life just to make ends meet. And so I started looking into going back to school because I wanted to figure out getting a degree so that I could have the financial wherewithal to take care of myself as a mom with 2 kids. Like, I gave up on the fact that any help was coming and that I was living in this fucking community and no help was coming. I was alone. And so the 3 things that became my priority was my health, my children, and my future financial stability. And I didn't know how I was going to manage all of them, but I was going to figure it out. And it was me and my kids. And at that moment, it was like me and my kids against the world. And I was pretty fucking done with everything else. And part of it is like when I had this moment about this other person being everybody going and banding around her to get her house clean, which happened frequently. And I was having this moment of realizing that I never got that. And I was having this moment of realizing, like, we all call this a community, but for me, it's not. And all the things that were going on around me were not the things I wanted in my life. And I was like, I've got to figure out what that is. And I'm going to take myself wherever I can find that. And if it's not here, it's going to be somewhere. And somehow we got supported in the idea that we were going to move. I don't even know how. But the other thing I started looking into was how your emotional health. I have always been somebody who likes reading. I like research. I like to dive into understanding why. I'm a puzzle person. And I love actual puzzles, but I'm also a puzzle person. Like, I want to understand how the pieces fit together because I want to understand how to fix things. And if that was me or somebody else, and I want to understand why and how it got broken. So I got really focused on making these things happen. And I decided I was going to go back to school. And I decided I was going to get a psychology degree. And I decided I was going to find a way to make the money that I felt like I should be able to make for my kids to build the future that I wanted them to have, because I couldn't rely on anybody anymore. But I remember I remember buying a bunch of books on heart stuff at the time. And I found it fascinating that these were written by doctors who basically said that when people have heart stuff, that there's more underlying issues and emotional issues behind that. And this started to begin to open up a world to me where I saw health as something that was not just a physical thing, that a lot of it has to do with emotional things that are going on around us. And when I look back at that time, even shortly thereafter, I started seeing like the compilation of all the things that were going on, the stress, the abuse, the working, the alcohol, the medications I was on. And I think one of the worst things you can do is drink alcohol and take Xanax. There's more overdoses from Xanax and alcohol mixed together than a lot of things. But I didn't know that at the time. I just was like, hey, this is great. It's the only thing that calms me down. And it is such a bad mix. But the other thing I found out about the particular thing I got diagnosed with, which was called PAT, um, and the solution was to eventually get an ablation where they basically go through the groin and they take an electrical current and it basically zaps the little area in your heart that's overreacting. And it ended up being really not a fairly minor, in and out of the hospital situation, in and out of the medical center situation. And I've never had a problem with it since. But I looked it up years later, and it's like the worst things you can do is have stress and drink. Like it just blows it out of proportion. And since then, I've also read a lot of stuff about the way that our bodies react to different things, and books like You Are the Placebo, which is a Joe Dispenza book, and it's all about how to heal things. Um, and I'm not saying you shouldn't go to a doctor. I just know that there's situations that your environment is going to add to and make worse. When you have disease, it comes from dis-ease. And there's another doctor who wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, and his name's Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton was a cellular biologist, and he used to work, I believe, at like the University of Washington or something like that. And then eventually he goes to like a medical school down in the Bahamas, which is like he went from like a prestigious school down to like the worst of the worst. But he started breaking down differently the way that cells, he was teaching cellular biology, so he had to figure out a way to, comes into a classroom and the teacher that was there has already taken off, like, and so the students are all behind. And he has to figure out how to get these kids who are not the top of the cream of the crop to be able to pass this class, because this is like the base of what they need to be able to learn to go on to the next classes. Like this is the beginning, right? And he ends up breaking down the way that a cell works. And what he starts realizing is that there's receptors in our cells. Our cells are intuitive in a lot of ways. And there's a receptor in our cells. And basically the whole basis is that, prior to a lot of stuff, there's been a belief that we are built by our genes, and our genes really dictate what's going to happen. So if we had a parent who had diabetes, then we're more likely to have diabetes. And what he's begun to prove is that the mindset and the habits have more to do with it than our genes ever have. And the belief set is a huge part of what causes us to turn on or turn off different things within ourselves. And so looking back at the amount of stress that I was under and all the other things, like it is no wonder that I had a broken heart. Like it's not shocking at all. In fact, I don't know how it could have been anything different than that situation for everything I was going through. Like there was no part of me at the time that felt loved, even by the women that I was surrounded by. And so I just went into full survival on so many levels of like, I got to figure this out and this is on me. And I felt like I was surrounded by people who were supposed to love me, but that I just didn't feel loved by anymore. And so there's a lot of science and research about why and how our emotions are kept in different places and cause us to go through difficult situations. And so one of the things about healing is acknowledging the places that you've been hurt so that you can let it go and stop holding it inside your body, because you hold that. And what's been difficult about this podcast is when I first decided I was going to make a podcast, I had this, I was like, oh yeah, and I'm going to put out an episode every 2 weeks and it's going to be so great. And oh my gosh, I'm going to have all this content. And then I'm going to put it on social media and I'm going to do this and do that. And then the reality is that I'm sharing stuff that even though I'm very aware of what I went through and I understand the trauma of it and I'm aware of the memories and it's not like I've locked anything away, when I sit and tell a story, it's not that simple for me because I tell you guys the story and then I get done and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've been hit by a truck some days. And some days like I have a lot of fun and I get done and I'm like, God, that was fucking great. But other days it's like I get this vulnerability hangover because I sit here and dive into and share so much about my life on an intimate level because I think that if I do that, that maybe there's a few people that would be able to get something out of this and it might help you to heal a little bit. And that it might help me heal a little bit. I know that this helps me to heal, even if it's difficult. And the therapy I go to, and all the other things I do. But I'm going through and I am creating a better situation. And I have a beautiful life. And so I want to share with people how to create a beautiful life because you deserve to have a beautiful life. I can't say that enough. I feel like I want to say that every single episode over and over again. You deserve to have a beautiful life. And so if there's some trauma that you have that has brought you to listening to me today, and that's the only thing you need to hear that. Heal what you need to heal so you can move on and experience joy and happiness and peace. Joy and peace are going to be the hardest things to relax into when you came from trauma. Enjoying peace is really difficult if you're used to trauma. And that's what you learn by healing. And I hope you allow yourself and love yourself enough to allow that. Love you. Hope you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are.